So in this lesson, what we will be doing is looking at the reactivity of metals. So we've learned how to extract them from rocks, and now we need to look at how reactive they are. We're going to be looking at how they react with three things. Firstly, we're going to be looking at how they react with oxygen, and you'll be looking at how they react with oxygen that's found in the air, and also at how they react with pure oxygen. Then you'll be looking at how they react with water, and finally how they react with acid. So having carried out a range of experiments using different chemicals, you can place the metals in order of reactivity. So by the end of this video, you should be able to describe the reactivity of metals in air, in water, and in acid, and be able to explain the experiments that show this reactivity. So materials all around us have different characteristics and properties. For example, we can talk about materials being hard or soft, strong or weak. Those are the physical properties. But we also have a set of properties called their chemical properties. And this is how a substance reacts whenever another chemical is put on it. So if we put water on something, does it react? Does it not react? As an example. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the reactivities of metals in air. Now, metals can be heated in oxygen to find out how reactive they are. Oxygen is a highly reactive gas and it forms compounds with many elements. When a metal reacts with oxygen in the air, a metal oxide is formed. So for example, a piece of magnesium heated in air, we'll see the magnesium react with oxygen in the air to form magnesium oxide. So whenever any element or metal reacts with oxygen, the product is called something oxide. So magnesium plus oxygen gives us magnesium oxide. Copper plus oxygen would give us copper oxide. Iron plus oxygen would give us iron oxide. So this is one type of reaction. We can react metals with oxygen just in the air. And in the air, oxygen makes up just under 20% of the total air. So this is an experiment you'll hopefully get to try in class. And you will need different metals to test. And you'll be heating them in a Bunsen burner, and you'll be using a blue flame. So you will repeat with several metals. You will have magnesium, aluminium, zinc, iron, tin, and copper. We want you to do the magnesium last, and as a safety precaution, you do not look right at the flame whenever you are reacting magnesium. For each metal, we want you to record what it looks like and how strong or intense the reaction looks like. So if it looks like the reaction is giving out a lot of light or heat energy, that would be a strong reaction. If not much heat or light looks like it's being given off, that would be a weak reaction. So you're going to see the experiment being done with lots of different metals. So here were the metals: aluminium, iron, zinc, copper, tin, and magnesium. And you'll see this happening. Now, once you've done this, so when we compare all of the experiments and we can see the order of reactivity, we should see that magnesium is the most reactive. It gave off such a really bright white light. That's why you couldn't look at it directly. And then at the bottom, you would have copper, which only gave off a little bit of a red glow. And the order of reactivity is magnesium, aluminium, zinc, iron, tin, and copper. And if we match those metals and that order to the list on the reactivity series, which we started looking at in our previous lesson at how to extract metals, we can see that it matches very well. Magnesium is the highest up of all of those 6 metals, then aluminium, then zinc, then iron, then tin, and then copper is the lowest down. So the higher up on the reactivity series, the more reactive you will be. Now, the previous experiment that you will hopefully get to try was reacting metals with oxygen in the air. And they said that oxygen is 20% of air. There's an experiment that your teacher should demonstrate for you where you will get to see metals reacting with pure oxygen. So 100% oxygen. And it's an experiment like this called the Archilus experiment. And it uses purple crystals called permanganate, which when they get heated up, they give off oxygen gas. And you will see a reaction happening in a test tube. Now, depending on whether it's a humid day or whether it is a dry day or a cold day, this experiment might work differently for different teachers. But you should see that the reaction happening between the oxygen being produced by the crystals and the metal inside that test tube is a lot more intense and a lot brighter than you would see when you reacted the metals just in air. And you might even see with some of the metals the test tube cracking or the test tube melting because the reaction is a bit more extreme. However, from this experiment, you will need to be able to describe 5 different metals and what it looks like whenever they react with oxygen. So the ones that you have to remember are these 5, and they are in your summary notes. But you do need to remember the color of the flame and the color of the solid that forms. So copper has a dull red glow and forms a black solid. Iron has a bright red flame and forms a pale grey solid. Tin has a white bluish flame and an off-white solid. Aluminium has a white flame and a white solid. Magnesium is a bright white light and a white solid. And your summary notes might also talk about potassium. Now, if potassium's in there, it's too reactive for us to do in class. But when it reacts, it will produce a purple flame, and it will produce a white solid. So make sure you use your summary notes to remember those because you can definitely be asked about those in your test. So that was looking at the reactivity of metals in air and in pure oxygen. In the second half of this video, we will look at how they react with acid and water, but we'll have a few questions first. Which metal was the most reactive when heated in air? Well, the answer was magnesium. Next, which was the least reactive when heated in air? The answer was copper, and close to it was tin. And can you put the 6 metals in order of reactivity? So the metals were, you had copper, aluminium, zinc, iron, magnesium, and tin. Can you remember the sequence? Well, the sequence was magnesium, aluminium, zinc, iron, and tin, and then copper. The way to remember the magnesium, aluminium, zinc, iron, and tin is that it's mazit, M-A-Z-I-T, and copper is at the end. So mazit is the order, and copper is always underneath. Now what we're going to look at are the tests or the reactions between metals and water and metals and acid. Now remember, from S1 you would have seen that the alkali metals, the most reactive metals on the very left-hand side of the periodic table, they reacted with water. So they skated along the surface, they fizzed, some of them went on fire, and if you saw a video of cesium and rubidium, the ones at the bottom of the alkali metals, you might have seen that a small amount of those compounds added to a bath of water react so strongly that the bath can explode. But that reaction produces hydrogen gas and an alkali solution, which is why the metals get called alkali metals. So the metal reacts with the water to produce the metal hydroxide, which is our alkali, and hydrogen. When metals react with acid, they react even more strongly. And that's because acid is a stronger or more reactive chemical than water. In this case, they will produce hydrogen gas as well if the metal reacts with the acid. So in class, you're going to hopefully be able to test out different metals with water and those same metals with acid to see, do we have a reaction or do we not? So what you'll have is you'll set up a test tube, and firstly, you'll fill the test tubes with water and add a bit of metal to each test tube to see if anything happens. Then you'll fill test tubes with acid and add a little bit of metal to each, and you will see if anything happens. So you will set the experiment up and you'll be testing different metals. And if you see any bubbles of gas being given off, what you will do is you will light a splint. So you'll have to ask the teacher to light the splint for you. And if you bring that splint near the fizzing, if you hear a pop, so a sound a bit like this, that means that that gas is hydrogen. And that is the test for hydrogen gas. And if you're going to do chemistry next year, you're going to need to remember that the test for hydrogen gas is to bring a lit splint to it and it will produce a squeaky pop. So after you've done the experiment, you should hopefully be able to say, has each metal either reacted with water or reacted with acid? Now the results that we hope you'll find are that calcium reacts with water and it reacts with acid. Magnesium doesn't react with water, but it does react with acid. Aluminium doesn't react with water and will react with acid. And zinc also doesn't react with water, but does react with acid. And we can summarize our reactivity series on this. So the metals potassium, sodium, lithium, and calcium, the ones very high up on the reactivity series, do react with water, they will react with acids, and they will react with oxygen. We then have adding in our mazit metals, magnesium, aluminium, zinc, iron, and tin. They are able to react with acids and they're able to react with oxygen, but they do not react with water. Then, if we add in copper, mercury, and silver, those are able to react with oxygen, but they cannot react with acid and they cannot react with water. And finally, we have gold. And gold doesn't react with anything. Now, one question that you could get asked is to name a metal that doesn't react with an acid. The easiest example to give is gold, but you could also say silver or copper. For the rest of this video, it's going to be practice questions based on reactivity of metals. Okay? So if you don't want to do those questions, you can stop the video now. Which metals react with water to produce hydrogen? Which metals? So that is calcium and magnesium, and that's from the experiment that we did, but also all the alkali metals, so lithium, sodium, and potassium would also work there. Which metals do not react with water from the experiment that you did, or that we talked about in the video? Well, the metals that didn't react with water were copper, aluminium, and zinc. Sorry, it was magnesium, aluminium, zinc, but copper also doesn't react. Which one of these is more reactive, calcium or magnesium? The answer is calcium, and that's because calcium can react with water and it reacts with acids, but magnesium can only react with acid and cannot react with water. So calcium can react with more things, so it's more reactive. How can you tell if a metal is reacting with acid? How can you tell? What do you see? You see lots of bubbles being produced. Now, of the metals that you tested, which one reacted the most strongly with acid? Well, it should have been calcium or magnesium reacting the most strongly. Which metal doesn't react with acid? Which metals don't react with acid? Well, that's going to be copper, but remember, silver and gold are other metals that don't react with acid. And put your metals in order of reactivity. So that's a recap. It's magnesium, zinc, iron, and copper. Remember, you've also got aluminium, the massive metal, so it's magnesium, aluminium, zinc, iron, tin, and then copper's at the